And welcome to Technology Tap. I'm Professor J. Rod. In this episode, the history of the Palm Pilot, the device that almost defined the future. Let's tap in. Welcome back to Technology Tap. I'm Professor J. Rod. Tonight, this episode it might be a little long. Not because it needs to be dramatic, not because it needs to impress, because some technologies don't make sense at speed. The Palm Pilot is one of them. You can understand it in highlights, you can understand it in bullet points, you can't understand it by jumping to the end. Because the Palm Pilot wasn't just a device. It was a proposal about how technology should behave in human life. And that proposal lost. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly. And quiet losses are the hardest ones to notice, especially when the world keeps moving forward. Before we talk about the Palm Pilot, we need to talk about where companies lived. In the early 90s, computers were not personal in the way we mean today. They were personal in ownerships, perhaps, but not in presence. A computer was somewhere you went. You walked into a room, you sat at a desk, you turned it on, you worked, and then you left. Your life did not continue with the computer. It paused. Your calendar lived somewhere else. Your contacts lived somewhere else. Your task lived somewhere else. Your thinking lived somewhere else. Computers were powerful, but they were episodic. And that distinction matters more than we care to admit today. Think about how information lived back then, not digitally, but practically. Your schedule might be in a paper planner, a desk calendar, or in your head. Your contacts may be on a Rolodex, a business card holder, notes scribbled in margins, your task on sticky notes, legal pad, or half-remembered promises. Information was fragmented, not because we liked it that way, but because there was no reliable place to put it. Computers were too far away. Yes, laptops existed, but they weren't companions. They were burdens. Heavy, expensive, fragile, battery hungry. A laptop was something you prepared to use. You packed it. You worried about it. You protected it. That metal overhead alone disqualified it from everyday life. So the problem wasn't computing power. The problem was friction. Here's the question nobody was asking yet. What if computing didn't demand attention but quietly supported it? What if technology didn't announce itself? What if it didn't insist on interaction? What if it simply waited? That question will become Palm's entire identity. Before Palm ever succeeded, something else was tried and failed. The Apple Newton. On paper, the Newton looked like the future. Handwriting recognition, natural language input, artificial intelligence. It didn't want you to adapt. It wanted to adapt to you. This sounds noble, but it was disastrous. The Newton didn't fail in secret. It failed in front of people. It misread handwriting. It lagged while thinking. It drained batteries. It corrected users incorrectly. And that last part matters, because nothing destroys trust faster than a machine that insists that it knows better and is wrong. People stop trusting it. And once trust is gone, no amount of updates can bring it back. Palm didn't laugh at the Newton. Palm studied it, and they reached a conclusion that would define everything that followed. Intelligence is expensive. Reliability is priceless. Palm will never try to guess. Palm will never try to interpret. Palm will never try to think for you. Palm will do exactly what you ask and nothing more. Jeff Hawkins did not start with a feature list. He started with human behavior. He asked uncomfortable questions engineers avoided. How fast does something need to respond before the brain perceives it as immediate? How much friction breaks habit formation? How much delay makes a device feel unreliable, even if it technically works? These are not engineering questions. These are cognitive questions, and Hawkins treated them seriously. You probably heard this story, but it's usually told too quickly. Hawkins carried a block of wood in his pocket, not as a gimmick, as a boundary. That block represented the maximum size the device could be before it stopped belonging to a daily life. Anything bigger would be forgotten in a pocket. Anything heavier would disappear mentally. This is where the Palm begins to diverge from almost every other tech company. Palm did not ask, what can we build? Palm asked, what will life tolerate? Palm's goal was not engagement, it was absence. You weren't supposed to notice the Palm Pilot. You were supposed to notice your life working better. That philosophy is radical and it is fragile because it produces quiet success. And quiet success is easy to misunderstand internally. When the Palm Pilot arrived in 1996, it did not feel like the future. It felt reasonable. No color screens, no animations, no sound, no intelligence. Just 4 promises: contacts, calendars, notes, and tasks. And one unspoken rule: it must never get in the way. Press the button, it's on. Not almost on, not thinking, on. This is not a convenience feature. This is trust engineering. Because when a device responds instantly, the brain stops negotiating with it. It becomes reliable, predictable, safe. Modern devices still chase this feeling. Most never achieve it. A device that didn't demand belief. It simply worked. And now, this is where we slow down even more, when we need to sit inside what it actually felt like to live with one. Because Palm's rise wasn't driven by press release. It was driven by daily habits quietly changing. Graffiti was a simplified single-stroke alphabet designed specifically for the Palm Pilot. Instead of trying to recognize natural handwriting, which was slow and error-prone in the 90s, Palm made a radical decision. Users were adopted to the machine, not the other way around. Each letter was written in one continuous stroke, usually resembling a printed capital letter. So like a O was like a circle, right? A T was a simple vertical stroke. Number and punctuation had their own strokes as well. Why did they invent graffiti? Well, in the mid-90s, CPUs were slow, memory was limited, and battery life was fragile. Handwritten recognition, like on the Apple Newton, required heavy processing, guessing over intent, and frequent errors. Palm didn't want guessing. They wanted certainty. So graffiti was designed to be fast, accurate, low-powered, and predictable. If you wrote the way the stroke was, if you wrote the stroke correctly, it always worked. Graffiti wasn't slow because the system didn't analyze handwriting. It only matched known strokes. No AI interference was required. That meant near instant character recognition, no lag, and no did it read it right moment. This instant feedback built trust, a huge reason people relied on the Palm Pilot device daily. At first glance, graffiti looked like a compromise. You didn't write normally. You learned to simplify alphabet. Critics saw this as a flaw. Palm saw it as honesty. Palm understood something deeply uncomfortable for most tech companies. Computers should not pretend to be human. Handwritten recognitions tried to erase the difference between the people and machines. Graffiti made the difference explicit. You were not confused about what Palm was doing. You knew the rules. And because you knew the rules, you trusted the results. Here's what actually happened in practice. The first day, graffiti felt awkward. The second day, it felt tolerable. By the end of the week, it felt fast. Because your brain adapted, and the adaptation creates ownership. Palm didn't just give users a tool. Palm gave users a skill. That mattered. Because skills stick longer than features. Graffiti turned interaction into muscle memory. You weren't thinking about writing. You were thinking about what you wanted to remember. The device stopped being the focus. Your intentions becomes the focus. That is extraordinarily rare in technology. Now let's talk about the HotSync. On the surface, HotSync looks boring. A cradle, a button, a cable. But psychologically, HotSync was a ritual. You came home. You placed the palm in its cradle. You pressed the button. And you watch your life back up itself. This did two things simultaneously. First, it made data loss feel survivable. Second, it created a daily rhythm. Palm became part at the end of the day. That matters more than people realize. And it was not only at night, it was at the beginning of the day. I had a Palm Pilot, and I remember before I would leave my house to go to work, I would hit the little HotSync button, right? So, and it was great because it would download my emails. It would download, like the New York Post, the Daily News, the New York Times, things that I can read on the train, on the bus. That is what it was intended to do. It would even download my emails. So I can read it on the bus, on the train, right? And I couldn't respond. There was no wireless back then. But these were the things that you can do. Modern cloud systems promise safety, but they also introduce uncertainty. Is it syncing? Did it upload? Where's my data? HotSync was visible, audible, confirming. You knew it worked. And knowing matters more than abstraction. Palm didn't spread because it was trendy. It spread because certain professions needed it. Let's talk about it. Doctors adopted Palm aggressively. Why? Because medicine is fragmented. Patients, notes, schedules, references. Palm fit into a lab coat pocket. It didn't slow them down. It didn't demand attention. It simply remembered what humans couldn't. When a doctor trusts a device, that device becomes invisible. And invisibility is the highest compliment. Pilots trusted Palm for similar reasons. Checklists, weather notes, flight data. Palm didn't try to replace systems. It supplemented conjecture. In high-risk environments, reliability matters more than innovation. Palm understood this extensively. Executives use Palm to survive meetings. Students use Palm to survive deadlines. In both cases, Palm didn't promise productivity. It delivered organization, and organization changes behavior. Palm OS did something radical. It assumed the user mattered more than the system. No spinning wheels, no frozen screens, no waiting for background tasks. Palm OS did one thing, and it finished before moving on. This wasn't technological limitations. It was a philosophy restraint. Modern systems brag about multitasking. Palm avoided it. Why? Because multitasking creates unpredictability, and unpredictability destroys trust. Palm OS chose calm, and calm is rare in computing. Developers didn't build Palm apps to get rich. They built them because the platform was friendly, predictable, understandable. Apps didn't compete for attention. They respected it. They shaped users' expectations. Palm users didn't browse endlessly. They accomplished things. Here's the turning point. Palm succeeded so completely at minimalism that it stopped believing minimalism needed defending. Internally, the conversation shifted. How do we stay invisible? To how do we grow? Growth is dangerous when your identity is restrained. Palm began chasing specs, more memory, color screens, faster processor. Yeah, I remember all that when they changed from the gray to the color. I mean, everybody loved it, that it was finally in color. All reasonable, all insignificant, because the question had changed. It was no longer, how do we organize information? It was becoming, how does this device live inside everything? Palm was solving yesterday perfectly. Tomorrow was arriving quietly. Palm believed phones were tools, not platforms, accessories to computing. That belief would cost them everything, because phones were about to absorb life itself. Communication, scheduling, media, identity. Palm saw addition, others saw replacement. Palm didn't refuse to change, they hesitated, they waited, they evaluated, they protected what worked. And hesitation is dangerous where paradigms shift. We left Palm at the most dangerous moment any successful technology ever reaches. Not failure, not decline, but uncertainty. Palm still worked. Palm was still trusted. Palm was still everywhere it mattered. And that's precisely what came next was so difficult to see while it was happening. Because of the shifts, they don't announce themselves. They whisper. Jeff Hawkins didn't leave Palm in anger. That's important. He left in restlessness. Palm had become careful, cautious, protective of what it had built. When a company becomes protective, experimental becomes negotiations. Negotiation slows everything. So Hawkins left and found Handspring. The Handspring visor looked familiar, too familiar. Critics called it a clone, but that missed the point. Because Handspring wasn't cloning Palm's hardware. It was challenging Palm's philosophy. Handspring added expansion slots. Suddenly a handheld can grow. GPS modules, memory modules, communication modules. Palm saw risk. Handspring saw possibilities. Palm worried about fragmentation. Handspring invited it. And this moment matters because it reveals the fault line. Palm believed quality came from control. Handspring believed relevance came from openness. Both were right, only one aligned with what was coming next. Palm had something rare, a platform people trusted. But trust creates fear. Fear of breaking what works. Palm began optimizing for consistency, for enterprise stability, for known customers, and in doing so, they unconsciously stopped optimizing for new behavior. This is where organizations fail quietly, not because they chose wrong, because they chose safely. Palm did not collapse, it fragmented. Palm, the hardware company, Palm OS as a licensable system, Palm Source, multiple partners, multiple priorities. Each decision made sense in isolation. Together, they produced drift. No single group was responsible for the future. And when no one owns the future belongs to someone else. Palm experimented with wireless, the Palm 7, limited data, curated services, control experiences. Palm treated connectivity as an enhancement. The world was about to treat it as oxygen. This is one of the most important lessons in technology history. When something becomes infrastructure, it stops being a feature. Palm did not rebuild itself around connectivity. Others did. Palm believed the question was, how do we make better handheld computers? The world quietly shifted to a new question. How do we carry our lives? Phones were no longer about calls. They were about presence, identity, availability, continuity. Palm still saw devices. Others saw platforms. BlackBerry didn't beat Palm with elegance. It beat Palm with urgency. Email always on. Communications immediate. Work everywhere. BlackBerry reframed the problem, and Palm hesitated again, because Palm still believed in balance. And balance is fragile in moments of disruption. When the iPhone arrived, Palm understood something was wrong immediately. Not because of the hardware, but because of the assumptions. The iPhone assumed constant connectivity, visual interaction, software as experience, the device as a hub. Palm had optimized for calm. The world was choosing immersion. Neither was morally superior, but only one scaled with human attention. Palm did not give up quietly. They built WebOS. And WebOS was beautiful. Fluid, human, gesture-based, multitasking done intelligently. Many ideas you use today appeared there first. But ecosystems don't reward elegance alone. They reward momentum. And momentum had already moved. Palm was no longer late. Palm was after. Palm didn't die in a scandal. It dissolved. Acquisitions, reorganizations, product lines quietly retired. No dramatic final press conference. Just silence. Which is fitting. Because Palm was never loud. Every modern smartphone carries Palm's DNA. Instant responsiveness, minimal friction, human-centered design, the belief that technology should assist, not dominate. Palm didn't lose because it was wrong. Palm lost because the world chose a different takeoff. Speed over calm, immersion over restraint, presence over balance. And once that choice was made, there was no going back. The Palm Pilot represented a path not taken, A future where devices waited patiently, attention was respected, technology stepped back when its job was done. For a brief moment, the future existed and it worked, but the world wanted more, and more always cost something. Now, I had a few Palm Pilots, and I loved them. I absolutely loved the Palm Pilot, and they had a lot of different companies that came out with Palm-like devices, like Dell. Dell had one, but they were absolutely fabulous. With a Palm Pilot, you could do everything with a phone, like an iPhone, except make phone calls. I mean, you could do absolutely everything. They had apps for it. They had, you can like I said, I would come in down to go to work in the morning. I would hit my HotSync button, and it would download everything that I needed on it. And so I would take the bus or take the train to go to work, and I could read, the New York Post on the bus, like if I had bought it, and it was fabulous. It also they eventually put in, you could put a card, SD card, and you could fill that card with music. They had a player on it. Later on, they created a player, and then they created a movie player, so you could put the movies in the SD card and watch movies on it. When I used to travel, when I was a tech, I used to fill up my SD card with movies, and then on the plane watch them. I mean, this was in the early, late 90s, early 2000s, when there wasn't, not like today, they have like a million movies when you go on an airplane. Back then, they didn't have a lot of choices, but you had your choices in your hand, right? You could watch all these shows off the Palm Pilot or, whatever equivalent that you had. I had the Dell one. And, you put an SD card, you download, what is that? The Apple software that it had would run on the Palm OS. The MOV files, you could put those MOV files on your Palm Pilot, and they would run, and you could watch movies, and the sound quality was excellent, and it was fabulous. I loved the Palm Pilot. Like I especially once it went color, I absolutely loved. You could watch, highlights, like if you were able, if there was a link that you could click on that had highlights, you could watch it. It was something else. And then you can get your email. The only thing is you couldn't respond. You could just read it, and then to respond, you could respond, but then you had to sync it again. And once you synced it, it will respond. Matter of fact, when I first started this job, the last job that I had when I was a tech, I started in 2000, and people realized that I can get my email on my Palm Pilot, and they would come to me and tell me, "Oh, can you set up my Palm Pilot so that I can get my email?" Like that became my job. Like part of my role was to get people's Palm Pilots on their phone. And then again, it's kind of like what I just said through the history of Palm. They did a lot of things right, but the more they started putting stuff on there, the less reliable it worked. Because I remember sometimes some people had a lot of trouble with the email. They would come back to me and say, "Oh, it worked for like 3 days and it stopped working." And like I didn't know why it stopped working. So I was good, but I wasn't that good back then. But yeah, it worked. It was a fabulous, fabulous product. If anybody had used it, let me know. I would like to, and tell me what you thought of it. For those of you who I don't know what the hell it is, look it up. Look it up on YouTube. What was the Palm Pilot? You see, it was great. It was one of the best products, in my opinion, that was ever made. It was a little bit ahead of its time, I think, and not embracing the wireless aspects of life as we know it was really their bad move. Not thinking that people were going to use it the way we're using technology now, where we have our phones, we tether to our phones, right, 24/7. So, I have my own thoughts on that. All right, let's close this out. The Palm Pilot teaches us something uncomfortable. Being right is not enough. Being elegant is not enough. Being loved is not enough. A technology surviving belongs to those who align where behavior is going, not where it should go. Palm perfected yesterday, but it didn't perfect the future. And was what led to their downfall. Thank you for listening to Technology Tap, the history of technology. I'm Professor J. Rod. Until next time. And remember, as always, keep tapping into technology.